A broke nursing student spots a police officer collapsing beside his cruiser. Heart racing, breath gone. The gas station clerk yells, "Don't get involved." But she runs anyway, spending her last $5 to save a man everyone else would have left to die. The next morning, 50 squad cars flood her street. Sirens blaring, officers marching toward her door. But they're not here for an arrest. They're here for something no one expected. What shocking secret do the 50 officers hide when they surround her home at dawn? Hit the subscribe button and tell me where you are watching. Your support helps us to bring more thrilling stories like this. Evelyn Taylor stood beneath the flickering fluorescent light of a 24-hour gas station, clutching a crumpled $5 bill. Her last $5. The air was cold enough to bite through her thrift store jacket, and her breath came out in small clouds. The streets were empty, the hum of the neon sign above her the only sound for miles. She'd just finished a 12-hour hospital training shift, missed the last bus, and now had to decide whether to save the money for tomorrow's fare or buy something to eat tonight. She rubbed her hands together, thinking about the small apartment she shared with her younger brother Marcus. The rent was late again. Her shoes had started to separate at the seams. Her stomach growled, but she pushed the thought aside. Tomorrow would be another long day. Then she heard it, a groan, deep and strained. Not far from the edge of the parking lot, a police cruiser sat idling under the gas station's canopy. A man in uniform slumped beside the open driver's door, his head bowed, one hand gripping his chest. Evelyn froze. The clerk inside glanced up from behind the counter, saw the scene, and shouted through the glass, "Don't get involved. That's a cop, leave it alone." Her pulse kicked up. Years of distrust between her neighborhood and the police flashed in her mind like warning signs. She'd seen what happened when people like her got too close to situations like this. But the sound the man made, choking, desperate, pushed those thoughts aside. She took a step forward. Then another. The officer, a broad-shouldered man with gray at his temples, gasped, "Can't breathe sugar," before his hand slipped and he fell sideways onto the cold pavement. Evelyn's training instincts surged to life. She dropped to her knees beside him, fingers trembling as she felt for a pulse. Faint, erratic. Diabetic shock. She looked toward the convenience store again. The clerk shook his head. "You'll get blamed for something, girl. Don't do it." Her phone screen was black. Dead battery. Number 911, no help coming. She sprinted inside, slammed her $5 bill on the counter. Water. Glucose tablets. Hurry. The man hesitated. "You sure? Just do it." Seconds later, she was kneeling beside the officer again, prying open the sealed pack with her teeth, slipping the tablets between his lips, coaxing him to swallow. His eyes fluttered open, dazed. "Stay with me," she whispered, holding his hand as the tremors slowly began to ease. Flashing lights appeared in the distance. An ambulance, then backup patrol cars. Evelyn stepped back, heart pounding, as paramedics rushed in. One of the younger officers grabbed her wrist. "Who are you? What happened here?" I found him like this," she said, breathless. The older man raised a weak hand. "She saved me," he rasped. His name badge caught the light. "Perkins. D." Evelyn nodded faintly, tears stinging her eyes. "You're going to be okay." As they lifted him into the ambulance, Officer Perkins caught her hand again. "Don't disappear," he whispered. Then the doors closed, and the sirens faded into the night. Evelyn stood in the parking lot, the cold seeping through her shoes, the silence settling heavy around her. She looked down at her empty hand, the $5 gone, spent on a stranger's life. A police officer's life. When she finally started walking home, she whispered to herself, "It was the right thing to do, wasn't it?" The next morning, the sound of sirens filled her street again. Only this time, they weren't chasing anyone. 50 police cruisers lined both sides of the block, red and blue lights flickering against the morning haze. Neighbors peeked through curtains, whispering. Evelyn stepped out onto her porch, heart hammering, certain something terrible had happened. Then she saw him, Officer Davis Perkins, standing in the center of the street, alive, smiling faintly, holding a small bouquet of white lilies. "Evelyn Taylor," he called out, his voice carrying over the stunned silence. "You gave me another day with my son." Behind him, 50 officers stood at attention, some holding boxes, others envelopes. One by one, they began to move forward. That moment, the flash of uniforms, the disbelief in her neighbor's eyes, the tremor in her chest, was the beginning of everything. But to understand how Evelyn ended up at that gas station, clutching her last $5 and making a choice that would change her life forever, we have to go back to the morning before that night. Before the sirens, before the gratitude, before the world knew her name. Before everything changed. Morning crept in through the cracked blinds. Gray and thin like the light was too tired to try. The room smelled faintly of instant coffee and detergent, and the air was colder than it should have been. The radiator had stopped working 3 days ago. Evelyn Taylor lay on her side, listening to the soft rhythm of her brother Marcus's breathing from the other side of the small one-room apartment. The alarm buzzed on the nightstand, sharp and insistent. She didn't move. For a few seconds, she just stared at the ceiling, tracing the small brown water stain spreading like a shadow above her. Then she exhaled and reached over to silence it. 6 a.m. Her day had begun. Evelyn swung her legs out of bed and rubbed her temples. She hadn't slept more than 4 hours again. Her body ached from yesterday's double shift. 8 hours shadowing nurses at the city hospital, then 5 more serving coffee and fries at the diner until past midnight. Her feet throbbed. Her hands smelled faintly of antiseptic and grease. The apartment was barely big enough for the two of them. The walls peeled in thin curls near the corners, and the hum of traffic below was constant. On the fridge, a small calendar was cluttered with reminders. Tuition due, rent 3 days late, Marcus, school trip, ask Ms. Daniels if he can still go. Next to it, a photo of their mother smiled from a chipped frame, her face soft and kind, eyes alive with the sort of peace Evelyn hadn't seen since she'd passed. Evelyn brushed her fingers against the glass. "Morning, Mama," she whispered. She moved quietly through the apartment, careful not to wake Marcus yet. The boy was only 15 but already carried more weight in his shoulders than a kid should. After their mother's death, he'd gone from playful to distant in weeks. He rarely spoke about her, and when Evelyn tried, he changed the subject. He didn't understand why she worked so much, why they never had time for anything but bills and survival. Evelyn poured water into the old kettle and set it on the stove. It took forever to heat. She opened the fridge. Inside, half a carton of milk, 2 eggs, and a container of leftover noodles. She frowned, doing the math in her head. She could scramble 1 egg and save the other for Marcus's breakfast. Rent was already late. The diner paycheck wouldn't clear until Friday. The hospital stipend came once a month and barely covered bus fare. She cracked the egg into a pan, whispering a silent prayer of thanks out of habit. Her mother used to say it all the time. Gratitude keeps the heart from going hard. Evelyn clung to that now the way some people clung to faith. When the kettle hissed, she poured the hot water into 2 chipped mugs. 1 for instant coffee. 1 for Marcus's cocoa mix. Mostly sugar, barely chocolate. She turned and called softly, "Marcus, time to get up." A groan answered from under the blanket. 5 more minutes, he muttered. "You said that 5 minutes ago," she said, even though he hadn't. "Come on, you'll miss the bus." He rolled over, face half buried in the pillow. "Nobody cares if I'm late." Evelyn sighed. She crossed the room and tugged the blanket gently. "I care." He looked up at her finally, dark eyes clouded with that mixture of resentment and fatigue that had grown more common since their mother's funeral. He was trying so hard not to be angry, and she was trying so hard not to let him see how tired she was. "You work too much," he said flatly. "And you complain too much." She forced a small smile. "Now get up. I made cocoa." That did it. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, the smell of breakfast enough to soften the edges of his mood. They ate in silence, one egg split between two plates, cocoa and coffee steaming beside them. Outside, the city woke in its usual chaos. Horns, voices, the distant bark of a dog. When Marcus finished, Evelyn handed him his lunch, a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in foil and an apple with a bruise. "Try not to trade it for chips today." He grinned, faint but real. "No promises." Evelyn walked him downstairs to the bus stop, both wrapped in the same weary quiet. She waited until the school bus came, until she saw him wave through the window, before turning back toward the apartment. By the time she got upstairs, the room already felt smaller again. The silence closed in like fog. She sat on the edge of the bed, pulled out her worn journal, and opened to a blank page. She wrote, like she did every morning, 3 things I'm grateful for today. Marcus still smiles sometimes. Mama's photo didn't fall again last night. I woke up. She underlined that last one twice. The journal was almost full. Pages of gratitude scrawled between lists of bills and work schedules. She didn't write for anyone but herself, but she always ended with the same line. Stay kind no matter what. It had been her mother's dying wish. Evelyn remembered the hospital room vividly. The beeping machines, the way her mother's hand felt thin but warm in hers. "Baby," she had whispered, "the world's already hard enough. Don't let it make you hard." The street was quieter than it should have been. Even the air felt hollow, like the city had paused to breathe. Evelyn Taylor stood under the buzzing light of the gas station sign, her reflection caught in the cracked window of the vending machine beside her. The hum of the fluorescent lamps mixed with the distant thrum of traffic, and the faint, acrid scent of gasoline burned her throat. She rubbed her hands together, trying to keep warm. The clock on her phone read 10:56 p.m. The last bus had left 20 minutes ago. Her $5 bill, the last one she had, sat folded in her pocket, her one-way home in the morning. She told herself she'd wait here until the first morning route started. Just a few hours. She could sit by the wall, maybe grab a cup of cheap coffee if she really needed warmth. Her eyelids were heavy from exhaustion. Her head throbbed with the rhythm of a day too long and a life stretched too thin. But then she heard it. A groan. Low, rough, and human. She froze, her head snapping toward the sound. Near the far side of the lot, under the yellow wash of a flickering streetlight, a police cruiser sat idling. The driver's door hung open. A man, an officer, was slumped halfway out, one hand gripping the edge of the door, the other clutching his chest. For a second, Evelyn couldn't move. Her heart hammered as she stared. The flashing dashboard lights pulsed weakly against his uniform, glinting off the badge on his chest. He gasped again, a strained noise that echoed through the lot. The gas station clerk leaned out from the doorway, cigarette in hand. "Don't get involved," he called, voice lazy, almost bored. "You don't want to mess with that." Evelyn's stomach twisted. He's in trouble," she said. "Yeah, well, he's a cop. They'll take care of their own. Just stay out of it." The man turned and went back inside, the door chiming as it closed behind him. Evelyn looked back at the officer. He was older, maybe mid-50s, gray hair beneath the brim of his hat, his breathing shallow and ragged. His name tag caught the light. D. Perkins. Her pulse quickened. Every warning she'd ever heard about situations like this screamed at her to walk away. What if someone saw her leaning over him and assumed the worst? What if backup arrived and thought she'd hurt him? Her hands trembled. "Don't. Evelyn. Just go." But then she remembered her mother's voice, soft and certain. "Stay kind, no matter what." She took one step forward. Then another. The gravel crunched under her sneakers as she crossed the lot. "Sir," she said, her voice small against the night. "Can you hear me?" His eyes flickered open, glassy with pain. "Low," he gasped, his voice barely audible. "Low sugar." Evelyn knelt beside him. His skin was cold, sweat beading at his temple. She pressed her fingers to his neck. His pulse fluttered, thin and irregular. Her training kicked in like instinct. "You're diabetic," she said quickly. Okay, I've got you." She grabbed her phone, thumbed 911, but the screen went black. Dead. God, no. She hit the button again, but nothing. The battery had died hours ago at the diner. She looked toward the store. The clerk was gone, nowhere in sight. Her mind raced. She had $5. Her last $5. She swallowed hard. Then she ran. The bell above the gas station door jingled as she burst inside. "Do you have glucose tablets? Candy? Anything sugary?" The clerk barely looked up from his phone. "Aisle 3. She ran down the aisle, grabbed a roll of glucose tabs and a bottle of water, and slammed them on the counter. $5, she said, breathless, pushing the bill toward him. He eyed her, unimpressed, and scanned the items. $4.78. She didn't wait for the change. She was already out the door before he finished the sentence. Back in the lot, she dropped to her knees beside the officer. His eyes had rolled back. His lips were pale. "Stay with me," she said, fumbling with the glucose. She tore the foil open and pressed one tablet to his lips. "Chew," she urged. "Come on, chew." Nothing. She lifted his head gently, poured a bit of water to moisten his mouth, and tried again. This time his jaw twitched. A faint sound came from his throat. "That's it. Good. Keep going," she whispered. Minutes felt like hours. She counted his breaths. Slow, uneven. Every second that passed chipped away at her fear and replaced it with focus. There was no badge now, no politics, no history. Just a human being on the edge of life, and her trying to pull him back. Then, faintly, she heard it. Sirens. Evelyn's heart lurched. Blue lights flashed down the street, growing brighter, louder. "Oh no," she whispered. She looked down at the half-empty bottle in her hand, the torn glucose pack, the officer's limp form beside her. How would this look? She stood, hands trembling, backing away just as two squad cars skidded to a stop. Doors opened. Boots hit pavement. "Hands up," a voice barked. Evelyn froze. "Wait, no, I..." Step back from the officer. He's diabetic. He needed sugar. One of them grabbed her wrist roughly and pulled her aside. Another knelt beside Davis Perkins, checking his vitals. "She saved me," the officer croaked, his voice cracked and weak but clear. The one holding her paused. "What did you say, sir?" "She saved me," Davis repeated. "She helped." The officer released Evelyn's arm slowly, guilt flickering in his eyes. We got it from here, ma'am." Evelyn stepped back, shaking, watching as paramedics lifted Davis onto a stretcher. They fitted an oxygen mask over his face. The flashing lights painted her skin blue, then red, then white. As they loaded him into the ambulance, Davis turned his head slightly, eyes half open. He reached for her hand. His grip was faint but sure. "Don't disappear," he whispered. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in her throat. The back doors shut. The ambulance pulled away, siren wailing into the distance. Evelyn stood there long after the sound faded, the empty wrapper and bottle still clutched in her hand. The younger officer cleared his throat awkwardly. "You should get home, ma'am." She nodded numbly. The gas station clerk peeked out from behind the glass, wide-eyed now that it was over. He muttered, "Crazy night, huh?" She didn't answer. The wind picked up, carrying the faint smell of gasoline and rain. Evelyn stuffed her hands into her pockets and started walking toward the bus stop, though there wouldn't be another bus for hours. The $5 was gone, the last of her money. She thought about Marcus, about the rent, about how stupid this all probably looked. Helping a cop in a dark parking lot in the middle of the night. People would have told her not to. Some would have called it naive, others reckless. But as she walked beneath the amber streetlights, she whispered to herself, it was the right thing to do. wasn't it?" Her voice cracked at the end, half question, half plea. The only answer was the wind and the hum of distant traffic. Somewhere a siren wailed, fading into the city's sleepless rhythm. And Evelyn kept walking. Morning crept in like a hesitant visitor. Slow, pale, unsure if it was welcome. The first light pushed weakly through the thin curtains of Evelyn's apartment, painting soft stripes across the peeling wallpaper. The air was still heavy with the smell of last night's rain and something else. Fatigue, maybe, or disbelief. Evelyn stirred. Her head throbbed with the dull ache of too little sleep and too many thoughts. She blinked at the ceiling, unsure where she was for a moment. Then the memories hit, sharp and bright. The gas station, the flickering lights, the officer collapsing, her shaking hands tearing open the glucose pack. His voice whispering through the noise. "Don't disappear." Had that really happened? Her throat tightened. For all she knew, she might have imagined it. Some adrenaline-soaked hallucination brought on by exhaustion and stress. Her phone lay face down on the nightstand. Black screen cracked through the middle. Dead useless. There'd been no calls, no updates. Just silence. She rolled onto her side and caught sight of the $5 receipt sticking out of her jacket pocket. The ink was smudged from rain. Water. $1.79. Glucose tabs. $2.99. Total. $4.78. So it had happened. Evelyn sat up slowly, wincing at the stiffness in her back. Outside, the city was beginning to stir. The low hum of buses, the hiss of brakes, the chatter of neighbors. She rubbed her eyes and swung her legs off the bed. Marcus's side of the room was empty. His blanket a tangled mess. He'd already left for school. Good. He didn't need to see her like this. Hollow-eyed, second-guessing herself, wondering if helping someone had somehow been the wrong thing to do. She shuffled into the kitchen, poured the last of the instant coffee into a chipped mug, and added hot water from the kettle. It smelled bitter and burned. She drank it anyway. For a few quiet moments, she let herself breathe. Maybe today would be normal. She'd go to her shift, check the notice board for extra hours, and somehow make rent. Maybe that was all life wanted from her, to keep moving. Then she heard it. Sirens. Not one. Not two. Dozens. The sound rolled down the street like thunder. Growing louder, closer. Evelyn froze, the mug halfway to her lips. Sirens in this neighborhood always meant bad news. Raids, warrants, someone dragged out in handcuffs. She set the cup down and moved to the window, pushing the curtain aside. And then her heart nearly stopped. Her entire block glowed red and blue. Police cruisers lined the street, one after another, their lights pulsing in perfect rhythm. People had spilled out of their apartments, standing on porches and sidewalks, whispering in disbelief. Some recorded with their phones. Others ducked behind curtains, watching in fear. Evelyn's pulse quickened. No. No, no, no. The words of the gas station clerk came back to her, cold and dismissive. You don't want to mess with that. Her stomach twisted. What if they thought she'd done something wrong? What if they were here for her? From across the hall, old Mrs. Hernandez peered out, clutching her robe. Evelyn, honey. What's happening? I don't know, Evelyn said, her voice barely a whisper. Are they here for you? Evelyn didn't answer. She couldn't. The knock came a second later. Firm. Rhythmic. She flinched, her heart slamming against her ribs. For a long moment she didn't move. Then, with trembling hands, she reached for the doorknob and turned it. The door creaked open. And standing there was Officer Davis Perkins. Alive. He looked different in the daylight. His uniform was pressed, his posture straight, but there was a softness in his eyes that hadn't been there before, or maybe she just hadn't seen it last night. In one hand, he held a small bouquet of lilies. Behind him, 50 officers stood in formation down the street, their cruisers idling in neat rows. The crowd fell silent. Evelyn's mouth went dry. Officer Perkins. He smiled faintly. That's right. His voice was low, warm. You probably didn't think you'd see me again. I wasn't sure, she admitted. Are you okay? He nodded. Thanks to you. Her eyes darted over his shoulder. What is all this? He stepped closer, the flowers trembling slightly in his large hands. You gave me another day with my son, he said quietly. And I wanted you to know what that means. Evelyn's breath caught. Davis turned, motioning to the line of officers behind him. They wanted to know too. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The sound of engines idling filled the air, mingling with the rustle of curious neighbors. Children peeked from behind adults, eyes wide. Then one by one, the officers began to step forward, carrying boxes, envelopes, bags. The first set them gently at her feet. Groceries. Fresh fruit, milk, bread, things she hadn't bought in weeks. Another officer handed her an envelope, a crisp white one embossed with the department seal. Her fingers shook as she opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten in neat cursive. Ms. Taylor, on behalf of the city precinct, we want to express our gratitude for your extraordinary act of compassion. Your bravery and selflessness remind us of the good we're sworn to protect. Please accept this small gesture, a scholarship grant to complete your nursing degree. The Police Benevolent Association. Evelyn's knees nearly gave out. What, this can't be. Davis reached into his coat pocket and handed her another envelope. This one's from me. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a check, enough to clear her rent, pay her overdue bills, maybe more. But it was the note underneath that undid her. You didn't see a badge that night. You saw a person. Thank you for that. Her throat tightened. Tears stung her eyes. The neighbors had fallen completely silent. Even the kids were still, watching this strange, impossible moment unfold. Someone in the crowd whispered, "They're helping her?" A man next to them muttered, "Never seen anything like this before." Davis smiled gently. "I didn't tell anyone your name at first, but when I woke up in the hospital, I told my captain what happened. The department came together. They said, maybe it's time we start showing people what compassion looks like, on both sides." Evelyn pressed a hand to her mouth, unable to speak. Behind him, one officer stepped forward, his voice cracking slightly. "You saved one of ours. The least we could do is show up for you." The applause started small, a single clap from the edge of the crowd, then spread, a wave of sound that broke the tension hanging over the block. Evelyn felt her chest tremble with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Davis handed her the lilies. "My daughter's favorite," he said softly. "She passed away a few years ago. Every time I see these, I think of her. I figured they should go to someone who reminds me of the kind of kindness she used to believe in." Evelyn's vision blurred. She took the flowers with both hands. "I don't know what to say. Just keep being you," he said. "That's enough." The last of the officers stepped forward, placing one final item at her doorstep, a framed certificate that read "Commendation for Bravery and Humanitarian Service." For a woman who had spent years feeling invisible, the moment felt unreal. Too big for the walls of her tiny apartment, too bright for her tired heart. Neighbors began to move closer, curiosity melting into awe. Mrs. Hernandez pressed a hand to her chest, whispering in Spanish, "Dios mío. Look at her." Marcus came running up the street, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. "Evelyn, what's going on?" His eyes widened when he saw the officers. "Are you in trouble?" She knelt down, tears streaking her cheeks. "No, baby," she said, voice shaking with laughter. "For once, I think we're okay." He looked from her to Davis, to the sea of uniforms behind him. "They came for you?" Evelyn nodded, her smile trembling. "I think they came to say thank you." The boy's face softened, disbelief giving way to something like pride. Davis extended his hand to Marcus. "You've got a brave sister," he said. Marcus shook it cautiously, eyes wide. "Yeah," he murmured. "I know." As the crowd pressed closer, some filming, some crying, Evelyn felt the weight of the moment settle around her. A night of fear had turned into a morning of grace. She looked at Davis. "You really didn't have to do all this." He shook his head. "Yes, we did. Because you reminded us what we're supposed to stand for." The officers began unloading more boxes. Fresh groceries for the neighborhood, first aid kits, even toys for the local kids. It wasn't just for her anymore. It was for everyone watching, everyone who'd forgotten that kindness could still cross impossible lines. Evelyn stood on the steps of her apartment, the bouquet in one hand and the letter in the other, as the crowd began to clap again. For a moment, she glanced at the cracked window of her home, the same one that had always framed her small, tired life, and saw something different reflected there. Not just struggle, but light. Davis turned to her once more before stepping back toward his car. "We'll be in touch," he said. "But take today to breathe, okay? You've earned it." Evelyn managed a shaky nod. "Thank you for coming." He smiled. "No, Ms. Taylor. Thank you for showing up when it mattered." As the convoy of officers began to disperse, the street erupted with murmurs, cameras flashing, laughter mingling with disbelief. Evelyn stood rooted in place, overwhelmed, the morning sun glinting off the lilies in her hands. Something had changed, in her, in them, maybe even in the block itself. And somewhere deep inside, she knew this wasn't the end of the story. This was the beginning of something far bigger than one act of kindness. The last cruiser rolled away, its lights fading into the horizon. The crowd slowly drifted back to their lives. But Evelyn stayed there on the stoop, staring down at the flowers, the letter, and the check in her trembling hands. A laugh slipped out of her, half joy, half disbelief, as tears ran freely down her face. She whispered into the morning air, "Mama, you were right. Kindness always finds its way back." And for the first time in years, she believed it. The morning light had begun to soften, stretching long golden beams across the cracked pavement as more neighbors gathered. Word had spread fast. Something incredible was happening on Sycamore Street. Doors swung open. Curtains twitched. People came out in robes, work uniforms, slippers, and headscarves, drawn by the sight of the police cruisers lined in a perfect, shining row. Evelyn stood on the small patch of concrete outside her apartment, her hands trembling around the bouquet Officer Perkins had given her. She couldn't find her breath, couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. 50 officers, 50, lined up shoulder to shoulder, the city emblem glinting on their sleeves. The air shimmered with the low hum of idling engines and a silence thick with awe. Across the street, kids who had once darted into alleyways at the sight of a police car were now sitting cross-legged on the curb, eyes wide. Old Mrs. Hernandez clutched her rosary, whispering prayers under her breath. Even the men who usually leaned on the corner fence, wary and skeptical, stood straighter, watching without a word. Evelyn tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. "Officer Perkins, I don't understand." He smiled gently, one hand resting over his chest where the heart monitor had been only days before. "You saved my life, Ms. Taylor. I don't think words are enough to explain what that means." He turned to the officers behind him and nodded once. It was like a silent cue. The first cruiser door opened, and 2 uniformed officers stepped out carrying boxes stacked high. They placed them carefully on the ground in front of Evelyn. "These are from all of us," Davis said. Every precinct officer pitched in. "We wanted to make sure you're not just thanked, but supported." Evelyn blinked at the boxes. Groceries, fresh produce, bread, cartons of milk, and neatly wrapped packages of household essentials. There were even flowers tucked into the corners, bright against the dull gray of the street. She shook her head, stepping back. "No, I can't." "You can," Davis interrupted softly. And you will. Because this isn't charity. It's gratitude. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Neighbors whispering, phones raised to record. The second officer approached, handing Evelyn an envelope with a gold seal. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a printed letter and a check. Her eyes scanned the words, but her mind froze halfway through. In recognition of your extraordinary act of compassion and courage, the City Police Department and the Benevolent Fund are proud to present you with full tuition coverage to complete your nursing education, as well as a grant to clear all outstanding student debt. Evelyn's mouth fell open. No, this can't be real. Davis smiled, his voice steady but full of warmth. It's very real. You didn't just help me, Evelyn. You reminded this department, all of us, of the kind of people we swore to be. The third officer stepped forward, carrying a sleek, silver laptop and a stethoscope neatly packaged inside a box. For school, he said, smiling shyly. And for your future patients. Evelyn reached out with both hands, still trembling. Her vision blurred as tears welled up. She tried to form words, but none came. All she could manage was a whisper. Why me? Davis's expression softened. Because you saw me as a man. Not a uniform, not a headline, not a symbol. Just a man who needed help. That's what real courage looks like. The street was silent. Evelyn pressed a hand to her mouth as tears streamed freely down her cheeks. For so long she had felt invisible. Another exhausted face in a city too busy to care. But here now, with 50 officers standing before her and her neighbors watching in stunned silence, she didn't feel invisible anymore. She felt seen. Davis turned toward the gathered crowd. I know what some of you might be thinking, he said, raising his voice just enough to carry across the street. That this, he gestured to the line of police cars, feels out of place here. That it doesn't belong. Maybe you're right. But I'll tell you what does belong. He pointed to Evelyn. This woman's compassion. Her bravery. Her belief that a human life is worth more than fear or judgment. That belongs here. That belongs everywhere. Someone clapped. Just one person at first, Mrs. Hernandez, her small hands shaking. Then another joined. Then another. Soon the sound grew, echoing down the block until even the children joined in, their cheers filling the morning air. Evelyn's tears wouldn't stop. She looked around, at the faces she'd known for years, hardened by struggle but softening now in the light of something pure. Hope. She looked back at Davis. I didn't do anything special, she said quietly. You did, he replied. You chose to care when it wasn't easy. That's the hardest kind of special there is. The applause grew louder, filling every corner of the street. One of the younger officers, barely older than Evelyn, stepped forward with an awkward grin. Ma'am, we, also kinda raided the donation fund. He handed her another box. Inside were medical books, new scrubs, and a sleek white nursing bag. A note taped on top read, For the best nurse in training we know. Evelyn laughed through her tears, pressing a hand over her heart. I can't believe this. Marcus came running down the steps again, his eyes wide as he spotted the growing pile of gifts. Evie, they're giving you all this. She nodded, voice trembling. Yeah, they are. He grinned so wide it made her laugh. Guess all those late nights were worth it. Davis chuckled. Smart kid. Marcus turned to him, cautious but curious. You're the one she helped, right? I am, Davis said with a nod. And I'm the one who owes your sister my life. The boy looked at his sister with a mix of pride and disbelief. She does that a lot, he said. Helps people who can't pay her back. Evelyn shot him a look, half embarrassed, half touched. Marcus. What? It's true, he said, shrugging. She's always doing that. The officers laughed softly, the tension easing. For the first time, the blue uniforms didn't feel like barriers. They felt human, men and women who'd chosen, for this day at least, to lead with their hearts. A local news van pulled up at the end of the block, cameras already rolling. Reporters spilled out, their microphones poised, their expressions hungry for a story. But this wasn't a story about conflict or scandal. It was about grace. As the camera lights flicked on, Davis turned back to Evelyn. "Mind if I say one more thing?" She nodded, wiping her cheeks. He faced the camera, then the neighborhood crowd. "There's a lot of division out there," he said quietly. "A lot of pain. And I know our uniforms haven't always represented peace for everyone. But today we wanted to show something different. We wanted to show what happens when compassion crosses the lines that divide us." He gestured toward Evelyn again. This young woman didn't see a badge. She saw a human being. That's the bridge we need. That's how healing starts. The crowd went quiet. Even the camera crew hesitated, caught in the sincerity of the moment. Evelyn's tears blurred the world into color and light. For a moment, all she could hear was the heartbeat in her chest and the soft echo of her mother's voice in her mind. "Stay kind, no matter what." When she finally found her voice, it came out as a whisper meant for everyone listening. "I just did what my mom taught me. You help when you can. You don't walk away." Davis nodded. "And because you didn't, I get to walk away from a hospital today, alive." The applause swelled again, this time with laughter and even a few cheers. Neighbors began hugging. Kids waved at the officers. Someone ran inside and brought out folding chairs and lemonade. What had started as shock turned into a celebration right there in the middle of the street. An unplanned reunion between two worlds that rarely met with kindness. Evelyn stood at the center of it all, surrounded by laughter, sirens, and sunlight. Davis stood beside her, a hand over his chest, eyes shining with gratitude. He leaned in, his voice low, meant only for her. "You saw a man, not a badge," he said again with quiet conviction. "That's what real courage looks like." Evelyn's breath hitched. For a long moment she couldn't speak. She could only nod as tears spilled freely down her cheeks. The sound of applause, laughter, and conversation filled the air, a chorus of life and unity she would never forget. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Evelyn Taylor let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't as broken as it seemed. That one act of kindness, one small choice, could ripple outward and change everything. And it had. By the next morning, the world knew her name. It started as a local headline. "Nursing student saves officer's life with her last $5. A heartwarming, underdog story tucked into the morning news segment. But by noon, it had exploded across social media, splashed onto national pages, reposted, debated, dissected. There she was, a grainy video clip taken from across the gas station lot, showing her kneeling beside Officer Perkins as he slumped against the patrol car. The phone's shaky lens caught everything. Her panicked voice calling for help, the tremor in her hands as she pressed the glucose tablet to his lips, the red-blue lights washing over her face when the backup arrived. Someone had added text over the video. "Black woman spends her last $5 to save a cop. Humanity still exists." It should have been beautiful. It was beautiful. For about 12 hours. Then the noise began. The comments split like a crack in ice. "She's a hero. That girl has more courage than the whole department combined." Faith in humanity restored. But then came the others. "Don't fall for it. This is PR for the police. They probably staged the whole thing. She's just being used for damage control." Evelyn scrolled through them at the diner, her hands gripping her phone so tight her knuckles went white. The article had over 3 million views. Her name, her face, everywhere. Linda, her coworker, set down a tray of coffee cups and leaned over. "Sweetheart, you're famous," she said, forcing a smile. "You should be proud." Evelyn looked up, her eyes tired. "I don't feel proud. I feel exposed." Linda frowned. "You saved a man's life, honey. The rest doesn't matter." But it did. Because for every message of support, there were 10 more tearing her apart. By afternoon, reporters were camped outside her building, cameras flashing as she walked home. A man with a microphone shouted, "Evelyn, did the department pay you to do it? Was this staged?" Another voice from across the street, "Do you regret helping him now that people think it was fake?" She ducked her head and ran inside, her heart pounding. That night she couldn't sleep. Every time her phone buzzed, she flinched. Some messages were kind. Others were venom. "You're a sellout. You saved one cop, big deal. What about all the others? You think they'd have done the same for you?" The words carved into her, each one a reminder of the divide she'd accidentally walked straight into. The next morning, Marcus burst into the apartment, holding up his phone. "Evie, you're on TV again." Evelyn groaned, pulling the blanket over her head. "Please don't tell me that." But he kept going. "They're calling you the $5 angel." She peeked out. "The what?" He grinned. "I mean, it's kinda cool, right? You're like famous now." She forced a smile for him. "Yeah, something like that." When he left for school, she opened her laptop, the new one the department had given her, and stared at her inbox. Hundreds of unread emails. Some were interview requests. Some were hate mail. A few were job offers. It all blurred together. Then she saw one subject line that made her pause. "Disappointed in you." She opened it hesitantly. It was from someone she knew. Carla Jenkins, a local activist who'd once organized food drives in their neighborhood. "Evelyn, you had the world's attention. You could have spoken about what our community goes through, about accountability, about real change. Instead, you let them turn you into their poster girl. Why help the system that hurts us? You're smarter than this." Evelyn stared at the words for a long time. Her throat burned. She'd known some people wouldn't understand. But reading it, from someone she respected, stung more than she expected. That night, she turned off her phone and sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the photo of her mother on the shelf. "What would you do, Mama?" she whispered. "Would you still have helped him?" Her mother's smile didn't answer, but Evelyn heard her voice anyway, echoing softly in her head. "Stay kind, no matter what." She closed her eyes, letting the tears come. A few days later she found out through the news, not through Davis himself, that he'd been placed on temporary suspension pending an internal review. "Officer Perkins faces scrutiny over community outreach conduct," the anchor said, her tone clinical. "The department is assessing whether protocol was breached when he and fellow officers visited the woman's home in uniform." Evelyn felt like the floor fell out from under her. She called his number, but it went straight to voicemail. "Davis, it's me," she said quietly. "I saw the news. I'm so sorry if this caused trouble. I didn't ask for any of this. I just hope you're okay." She hesitated before hanging up. "You told me not to disappear," she added softly. "But now it feels like you're the one who's gone." Days blurred together. Some of the officers who had once smiled at her during the ceremony now avoided her in public. At the diner, customers whispered when she passed. At school, classmates stared. Everywhere she went, her name followed, but it didn't feel like hers anymore. It belonged to headlines, hashtags, strangers who thought they knew her. One evening, she sat on her bed, scrolling through the endless online arguments about her story. Someone had posted a slowed-down version of the gas station video, claiming they could see proof it was staged, that she'd known the officer all along. The comments below were a battlefield. "This girl is a liar. You can literally see her shaking. How is that fake? She's being used and it's sad. Y'all just can't handle kindness being real anymore." Evelyn dropped the phone on the bed and covered her face. The world had taken a simple act, a moment between two human beings, and twisted it into a debate. That night, the loneliness hit harder than ever. She went to her journal, flipping through the pages filled with gratitude lists. Her handwriting looked foreign now, like it belonged to someone braver, someone untouched by cynicism. She picked up her pen. 3 things I'm grateful for. Marcus. He still believes in me. The man lived. That has to count for something. Maybe tomorrow will hurt less. Her hand hovered over the page before adding one more line, smaller than the rest. But I'm so tired of being good. A week later, an envelope arrived in the mail. It was plain. No return address, no logo. Just her name written neatly across the front in careful handwriting. For a moment, she almost didn't open it. She'd gotten enough letters to last a lifetime. Some kind, some cruel. But something about this one felt different. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Evelyn. Don't lose faith. The world's watching how you respond. Sometimes good people get caught in bad storms. But storms pass, and the good remains. I'm not allowed to contact you directly right now. But I needed you to know I'm still here. Still grateful. Still alive because you didn't walk away. Davis Perkins. Evelyn read it 3 times. By the 3rd, her hands were shaking too hard to hold the page steady. She pressed the letter to her chest, closing her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel alone. The world could debate, twist, argue, and doubt. But somewhere out there, a man was alive, breathing, because she'd made a choice to help. And maybe that was enough. She set the letter beside her mother's photo, whispering through her tears. Okay, Mama. I'll stay kind. But this time I'll stay strong too. Outside, rain began to fall. Soft, steady, cleansing. Evelyn sat by the window, watching it wash the city clean, and wondered if maybe it could do the same for her. Now let's write Chapter 7 following the outline below. The max word count should be 2,000 words. Write it and maintain the tone of the previous section. Chapter outline. Chapter 7. The partnership. Tone. Hope rekindled, unity builds. Synopsis. Evelyn visits Davis at the precinct. They share coffee, both tired of the noise but determined to turn it into something positive. Together, they outline a new initiative. Project 5, a bridge between police officers and communities through medical aid, mentorship, and empathy training. Inspired by Evelyn's $5. Other officers volunteer. The project begins with small events. Health drives, community dinners, story-sharing nights. Ending beat. At one such event, Davis introduces Evelyn as the spark that reminded us all what service really means. Applause fills the room, and healing begins. The city looked different now. Maybe it was the sunlight, warmer, softer somehow, or maybe it was that people had started smiling at each other again. On street corners where sirens once meant fear, laughter and music now filled the air. Every Saturday, volunteers in blue and white shirts with Project 5 printed across their chests could be seen setting up tents, distributing food, checking blood pressure, offering help. And at the heart of it all was Evelyn Taylor. She stood outside St. Matthew's Hospital, the badge clipped to her uniform reading registered nurse. After years of long nights, missed meals, and tears shed quietly into textbooks, she had finally made it. The hospital lobby buzzed with morning energy. Nurses exchanging reports, patients lining up for check-ins, the smell of coffee drifting from the staff lounge. Evelyn adjusted her stethoscope and glanced at her reflection in the glass door. She still looked like herself, same deep eyes, same tired smile, but there was something steadier now. A kind of peace that came from purpose. It had been 9 months since that night at the gas station. 9 months since $5 had changed everything. Project 5 had grown faster than anyone expected. What started as one small meeting in a church basement had spread to every precinct in the city. Officers partnered with nurses, students, and local volunteers to host community drives and open dialogues. The media called it a quiet revolution in compassion. Every week brought new stories. A retired officer driving an elderly woman to her dialysis appointment, because she reminded me of my mother. A teenage boy performing CPR on a stranger after attending a Project 5 first aid session. A single mother and a police sergeant opening a free tutoring program together. Each story carried the same heartbeat. Kindness passed on. Evelyn walked down the hospital corridor toward the pediatric wing, a clipboard in one hand, her phone in the other. A text from Marcus blinked across the screen. Marcus, got the tents set up for the Project 5 drive. You better not be late, Evie. Evelyn, on my way soon. Don't forget the bottled water this time. Marcus, geez, one time. One time. She smiled. Her little brother wasn't so little anymore. At 16, Marcus was one of Project 5's most dedicated volunteers. Quick with a grin, quicker with a helping hand. He'd grown from a skeptical teenager into a young man who believed that change wasn't a myth. It was a choice. After her shift, Evelyn changed out of her scrubs and headed to the community park where the latest Project 5 event was already underway. Banners fluttered in the breeze. Folding tables overflowed with medical supplies, snacks, and stacks of pamphlets. Kids ran between tents, their laughter mingling with the upbeat music playing from a borrowed speaker. Davis Perkins stood near the registration booth, clipboard in hand, his sleeves rolled up, his face creased with the kind of tired joy that comes from building something real. Look who finally clocked out, he said, spotting her. Hey, at least I showed up, she teased. You look like you've been here since sunrise. He grinned. Maybe I have. Retirement doesn't sit well with me. She raised an eyebrow. You're not retired. Yet, he said. But when I do, I plan to spend every day annoying you at these events. Evelyn laughed. That sounds about right. Together, they walked through the park, greeting volunteers and visitors. People stopped to shake Evelyn's hand, to thank her, to share their own stories. One woman with tears in her eyes said, My husband met an officer through Project 5. They started a neighborhood cleanup together. I didn't think I'd ever see that kind of thing again. Evelyn squeezed her hand. That's exactly why we do this. By noon, the park was buzzing with energy. Local news crews filmed interviews. Children painted colorful murals with the words Hope Lives Here across wooden boards. At one corner of the event, Evelyn spotted a familiar face. Carla Jenkins, the activist who'd once written her that scathing email months ago. Their eyes met, and Evelyn's chest tightened for a moment. But Carla smiled this time. She walked over, extending her hand. Looks like you were right, she said softly. You turned it into something real. Evelyn shook her hand, her smile warm. It wasn't just me. It never is. Carla nodded. If you ever need help coordinating more volunteers, count me in. The words settled over Evelyn like sunlight. Healing wasn't always loud. Sometimes it arrived quietly. In forgiveness, in understanding, in the courage to start again. Later that afternoon, Davis took the small stage near the fountain, microphone in hand. Before we close, he began, I just want to say this isn't about me. Or even Evelyn, though she'll never admit how much she's done. This is about us. Every one of you who decided that bridges are better than walls. The crowd applauded, and Evelyn, standing off to the side, felt tears sting her eyes. He continued, 9 months ago, I was one bad decision away from never seeing my son again. But a stranger with $5 and a good heart gave me another chance. That act started this. So if you ever wonder whether kindness matters, look around you. All of this, is proof. The applause swelled, the kind that made the air hum. Marcus stood near the front, clapping louder than anyone else, his grin wide and proud. Evelyn caught his eye, and he gave her a thumbs up. After the event, the crowd began to thin. The sun dipped low, casting gold across the park. Evelyn helped pack up the medical kits and fold the tents while volunteers chatted and laughed around her. A small voice behind her said, Ms. Taylor. She turned. A teenage boy, maybe 15, stood there clutching a backpack. His brown eyes were shy but earnest. My name's Aaron, he said. I'm Officer Perkins's son. Evelyn blinked, her heart warming instantly. "You're Aaron." He nodded. "Yeah. I, wanted to meet you. My dad talks about you all the time. Probably too much." She smiled. "He's allowed." He looked down at his shoes, scuffing them against the pavement. I wanted to say thank you. For saving him. He wasn't the same after Mom died. But, after that night, I don't know, it's like you gave me my dad back." Evelyn's throat tightened. "You don't have to thank me, sweetheart." He stepped forward and hugged her. A quick, earnest squeeze that said more than words ever could. "I do," he murmured. "Because you didn't just save him. You saved us." When he stepped back, Evelyn wiped her eyes, smiling through her tears. "You're a good kid, Aaron. Your mom would be proud." He nodded, his voice soft. "Dad says the same thing." As he ran off toward Davis, Evelyn stood there for a long moment, the noise of the park fading into the background. She thought of that night, the flickering gas station light, the cold air, the last $5 she'd held in her hand. It felt like a lifetime ago. That moment of choice had rippled outward, into laughter, healing, forgiveness, unity. Into this. Later that evening, she sat with Davis on a park bench as the last of the volunteers packed up. The sky blazed pink and orange over the city skyline. "You know," he said, "I used to think I understood what serving meant. 25 years on the job, and I thought I'd seen it all. Turns out, I didn't know a thing until you showed up." Evelyn smiled faintly. "I didn't show up to teach anyone a lesson." "No," he said. "You showed up to save a life. And in the process, you saved a whole lot more." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint sounds of laughter and conversation down the block. Evelyn leaned back, closing her eyes. "This was never about heroism, Davis." He glanced at her, his expression soft. "Then what was it about?" She opened her eyes, looking out over the park, the last of the banners fluttering, the fading sunlight catching the faces of people who'd learned, together, to see each other differently. "It was about humanity," she said simply. "That's all it ever was." Davis nodded slowly, the corners of his mouth lifting into a small smile. "Then maybe that's enough." They sat there in comfortable silence as the sky dimmed into twilight, the city lights flickering to life one by one. And somewhere in that glow, in the hum of laughter, the smell of food, the sound of voices carrying hope into the night, Evelyn knew that her mother's promise had come full circle. Kindness hadn't just changed her life. It had changed the world around her. The night air was cool and quiet, the kind of stillness that made the city feel gentler, almost forgiving. Evelyn Taylor stepped out of St. Matthew's Hospital, the glass doors whispering closed behind her. Midnight again. The lobby lights glowed faintly through the glass, reflecting her tired face. Older now, maybe, but steadier. A year had passed since the night that changed everything. Her shifts were still long, her feet still ached, and her hair was still usually tied back in that same messy bun. But her eyes carried something new. The calm of someone who had seen the best and worst of people and still chose to believe in the good. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders and walked toward the bus stop. The streets were mostly empty, save for the neon flicker of a nearby gas station. The same kind of flicker. The same kind of night. Something in her chest stirred, a faint echo of memory, the ghost of adrenaline. The gas station light buzzed overhead, the hum cutting through the quiet. She smiled to herself. Funny how life comes back around. Across the lot, a small sedan was parked near one of the pumps. Its hood popped open. A man stood beside it, his face lined with exhaustion, a toddler bundled in a blanket perched on his hip. The child whimpered softly, rubbing her eyes. The man glanced toward the convenience store, then back at the car, running a hand over his short hair, clearly trying not to panic. Evelyn slowed. She could have kept walking, she'd had a 12-hour shift after all. But something about the scene pulled her in. The worry in the man's face, the tremble in his voice as he murmured reassurances to his daughter. It felt all too familiar. She walked closer, her voice gentle. "Hey, you okay?" He looked up, startled. Oh yeah. I mean, not really. He laughed nervously. Ran out of gas. The card machine inside won't take my debit, and I left my wallet at home. I'm trying to get my little girl back before she falls asleep. The toddler looked at Evelyn then, big brown eyes blinking through messy curls. She clutched a stuffed bear in one hand, the kind of innocent trust only children have shining through her expression. Evelyn smiled softly. How far you got to go? About 10 miles. I just need a gallon or two to make it home. She reached into her purse without hesitation. Inside were 2 worn bills, a 10 and a single folded tight. It was the end of the week, and payday wasn't until Monday. She'd planned to use that last 10 for groceries. Her fingers brushed the paper, and she felt it, the weight of memory of that night long ago. The flickering light, the dying man, the crumpled bill that changed everything. She looked at the father again. His eyes were weary but kind. His daughter leaned into his shoulder, half asleep, trusting him completely. Evelyn pulled out the 10 and split it in half, offering him one of the bills. Here, she said, pressing the 5 into his hand. Get what you need. He froze, staring down at the money like it was a miracle. I can't take that. You don't even know me. Evelyn smiled, the same gentle curve of her lips that had carried her through 1,000 long nights. Doesn't matter, she said. Someone once helped me when they didn't have to. Just pass it on when you can. The man blinked, emotion rising in his eyes. Thank you, he whispered. God, thank you. She nodded, already turning toward the bus stop. Take care of that little girl. Behind her, she heard him start the pump, heard the beep of the machine finally activating, and then the faint sound of a child's laughter, light, pure, carried on the wind. Evelyn smiled to herself. The city stretched before her, 1,000 windows glowing, each one holding a life, a story, a moment of choice. She thought of Project 5, now larger than she ever dreamed, reaching cities she'd never been to. She thought of Davis, still calling every week to tell her about new initiatives and partnerships. She thought of Marcus, now applying to college to study social work. And she thought of her mother. Her mother's voice, soft and steady, echoed in her mind. The world's already hard enough. Don't let it make you hard, too. Evelyn looked up. The streetlights shimmered like stars brought down to earth. She whispered into the quiet, I kept my promise, Mama. As she walked on, her figure faded into the silver glow of the city. One person among millions, but one whose small act of compassion had rippled farther than she could ever see. Somewhere across town, a police officer was handing out medical kits to families in need. Somewhere else, a teenager was learning CPR at a Project 5 class. And now, a father was filling his gas tank because a stranger gave him $5 and a reason to believe in people again. The circle had closed, and yet it kept expanding. The bus pulled up, headlights cutting through the mist. Evelyn stepped on, dropped a few coins into the slot, and found a seat by the window. As the city rolled by, she leaned her head against the glass and smiled. The narrator's voice, soft as a memory, seemed to rise with the hum of the engine. A year ago, Evelyn Taylor spent her last $5 to save a stranger's life. Tonight she gave 5 more, not to repay a debt, but to keep the light alive. Because kindness doesn't end where it begins. It grows. It multiplies. It finds its way back home. And under the flickering glow of that gas station sign, somewhere between exhaustion and hope, Evelyn Taylor's story came full circle. Not as a tale of charity or heroism, but as proof of one quiet truth. When you choose kindness, the world remembers. Hit the subscribe button to enjoy more thrilling stories like this.